Can you imagine the surprise of going home to dinner with the greatest teacher in the world when you should have been dead? I'll tell you another story. There's a young man. He's 4 years old. He's curled up in a little ball. He is under a set of steps, and somebody is hitting the steps with a 2x4. And the only reason that it didn't kill the boy is because the steps got in the way. The anger was everywhere. Several weeks later, a man came along and said, "They don't love you over there, but I love you." And he took that boy, and he took him to his house, and he began to teach him things. And the things are things that no boy should ever be taught. And by the time the boy is 9 years old, he has become exactly like the girl, because he is selling himself from the time he is 9 or 10 until he is 14 to anybody that wanted him. But at the same time, he was, just like the girl, trying to maintain a front. He was a Boy Scout. In fact, he was almost the highest rank of Boy Scout. He was a straight A student. He was a junior deacon in the church. In fact, he went to the church where the writer of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe, actually had the vision to write Uncle Tom's Cabin after the death of a runaway slave. And he was considered a perfect child. So now you have a perfect child on one side during the day, and you have a boy running the streets selling himself at night. And one day he goes to a Bible study about 9:30 at night. He sees some things in Scripture. He discovers that God is real. And he realizes that he's got to believe or not. So he said, "God, I know you're real," because his mind, very sharp, caught the time element of prophecy and the mathematics of prophecy. And if you put it together in the Scripture properly, there is no way there cannot be a God, because everything happened according to the plan. And he said, "Okay, God, you're real, but I have this problem. How do I not have this problem? So I will follow you if you will take this problem away from me." The next morning, 8 o'clock. Now we're talking Wednesday night, 9:30, 8 o'clock Thursday morning. Knock on the door. He opens the door. Biggest, fattest policeman you have ever seen. Guns, radios, billy clubs, hanging on his side saying, "I want you." And the boy said, "God, this is not exactly what I had in mind." But God had something better in mind. That afternoon at 4 o'clock, by the way, his mother recovered from the shock, because back in those days, nobody ever said anything about the problem. Okay, we're all at the Conference for Homosexuals Anonymous, so we don't have to hide the big H word in here, okay? The boy was as queer as a $3 bill. He thought he was a girl, because he had been used as a girl since he was about this big. But the church came along and said, well, you've all read the list in the Bibles? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. Especially thou shalt not do this. Of course, that big do this is right in, if you ever looked at those lists, they're very interesting. It's just before the gossip and just after the thief. So who's the most guilty? Or is there any difference? Anyway, God said, you're going to jail. 4:30 in the afternoon, he is standing in front of the judge. He is 14 years old. He is petrified because the judge said, I am going to send you to the state reformatory for boys. That means he would go and live with 300 teenagers, all of whom were in the prime of adolescence, and all of whom would use him for one purpose. And then that little lady that gave the Bible study at the house, happened to be in the courtroom, stood up and said, Your Honor, you know, we have Christian boarding academies. If I could get him into one of those schools, would you change your sentence? Now we're talking 1961. Once gay, always gay. That was the theory. Cannot change, don't even try. And the judge said, if you will take him to a psychologist and get him tested, and the psychiatrist agrees that this would help him, then take him to the school. If they will accept him, all right, any lawyers in the crowd? Yeah, we got a lawyer. What's the legal ramifications of taking a known male prostitute and putting him in a dormitory full of 75 boys?
Might be used a little bit.
Yeah. And the legality? The school could be sued if he goofed
Oh, absolutely.
once.
Big time.
So what are his chances? How do you get a psychiatrist that doesn't believe in change to say you can change, and how do you get a school that can't take you in to take you in? And this boy is facing this dilemma, but the next day, Friday, he's sitting in front of a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist gave him all the tests, and he scored very beautifully on the female side. In his thinking, he was absolutely mixed up. Totally misidentified. But the psychiatrist was about 65 years old, and the part that I remember most was the psychiatrist had a number on his wrist. And his last name was Lazowski. He was a Polish Jew. And he had been placed in Auschwitz. After the test, he stood up, he came around the desk and did something, then we've got a psychiatrist or two in here. Are you allowed to stand up, go around the desk and hug your patients? No. But old Dr. Lazowski got up, came around in front of the desk, wrapped his arm around me and said, I have come from a hell worse than yours. God will bring you through this. I'm going to sign the paper for you to go to school. 2 days later, Sunday morning, I'm sitting in front of the principal of the academy. His name was, well, I really shouldn't say his name. Let's put it this way, his initials were LSD, and we called him that all the time. And this was, see, we have some people from the 60s here. I can see that right now. You know what I'm talking about, right? The principal was one of these people that could look at you and stare a hole through you. You know, stern was mild for him. And he was also the type of guy that the next time I saw him was walking down the aisle of the church with a baseball bat balanced on the end of his nose, and he made the whole length of the aisle with 300 kids cheering him all the way. He was one of those rare people that could balance mercy and fun with justice. And he sat behind his desk, and he did not say one word for about 2 minutes. He just closed his eyes and rubbed his chin. And I knew what he was doing, I think. On his desk was a file bigger than that computer. And that was me. When he opened his eyes, without saying anything, he reached over, he opened the drawer on the left-hand side of the desk, picked up the file, put it in the drawer, closed the drawer, and said, if you don't open that drawer in the next 4 years, I won't either. Welcome to a new life.
Yes.
Whew. I was in. I didn't know what I was in for. Later on, I discovered that if you had a girlfriend and you walked up the aisle or up the sidewalk, they had a scarf, you know. She held one end, you held the other, and it had to be tight in the middle. Otherwise, you were breaking the rules and got to go see the good doctor again and again and again. But it was the place that I had to be, because if you're going to get help, you have to separate, and I think this is a direct quote from my good friend Richard over here, you've got to separate the boy from the toy. You've got to change him completely in environment for him to have a chance to change, because if you stay where you are, the attractions are sometimes too great. And God picked me up and in 1 week's time set me down in the middle of this academy, but that's not the best part. The best part came about 2 hours later when we went out to lunch. We went and had dinner at the home of a very wonderful lady. She was the sister of the person who gave me the Bible studies. I remember it clear as a bell, Japanese motif, table about 3 feet off the floor, everybody sitting on pillows. And they're, well, I'm from the backwoods of Maine, okay? I wouldn't know a chopstick from an axe. But they were going to eat with chopsticks. Door opens, in walks a fellow that is 6'3", gray hair, about 60 years old, 65 years old, deep bass voice, dressed to the T. My thought was, how's he going to fold those legs under this table? He comes over and he sits next to me. He reaches in his pocket, he pulls out a card, handwritten, business-sized card. And on it was a verse from the Bible, Philippians chapter 1 and verse 6. And he said, God told me to give this to you. Now, when the sentence starts out, God told me to, either you're talking to a nut or he's got something you want. And there's no halfway between. And he handed me the card. And I read these words, being confident of this very thing, he that has begun a good work in you will complete it. And my mind said, God just sent you a handwritten note, dummy. You challenged, God answered. In 4 years, I was the student dean in charge of the 75 boys. It took me 14 more years to get through the situations that I came out of, to dig deep enough to solve the problem. But that one text of Scripture, he that has begun a good work in you will complete it, stuck in my mind. And so, as depressed as I could have gotten, and did, several times, I never gave up that one thing. I went on until 1977, when Homosexuals Anonymous was not in existence. And I met the first man in my life who had ever changed. Before then, somebody could walk up to me from the Bible and say, oh, you can change, go out and do it, you know, blah, blah, blah. Go. It's easy, go do it. And I thought to myself, you idiot. I felt like I was born this way. How am I going to go do it?